All right, folks. Well, awesome. Thanks again for joining. We're going to go ahead and get started with our webinar today, which is all about South Carolina solar incentives. Thanks again for joining. And if anyone else trickles in, feel free to send us any questions that you might have. As at the end of our time, we'll have some time for some Q&A. All right, and so we'll get started here just by providing a quick overview for what to expect from today's webinar. First, we'll provide a brief introduction to who Cape Fear Solar Systems is, who we are here in our area, the work that we do. We'll also touch on the basics of solar, how you can expect a solar system to work on your home. We'll talk about the federal tax credit, as well as the South Carolina tax credit, and finally, a utility rebate program that is also available in South Carolina. And then we will pass it over to my colleague, Caleb Timothy, who's our residential project developer for South Carolina, so that he can speak to a couple of customers and homeowners that he's worked with over the last several months and their experiences in going solar and the incentives they were able to take advantage of. And finally, we'll touch on what's next and what our process can look like in terms of evaluating solar, and do a little bit of Q&A. Now, and so Cape Fear Solar Systems has been in business here since 2007. We have over 4,500 plus installations in the region since that time. And that includes in North Carolina here, and we're of course located in Wilmington, so plenty of installations in southeastern North Carolina, but also into South Carolina, where we have our electrical licenses as well. We have 60 plus employees. Of course, we're BBB accredited. We really believe that our reviews speak for themselves. And we also are community focused. And really all that that means is that we have close relationships with not only the utilities that we work with in our region, but the authorities having jurisdiction, so the permitting department, whether that be the counties or cities. And that goes a long way into making sure that when we're working on a project in our region, it's going to go smoothly for us. It's going to go smoothly for the homeowner as well. And those are just a few of the awards we've won in the last year or so. In terms of how solar works and the products that we install PV electric panels, which are traditional solar panels up on the roof. We also install battery storage technology and electric vehicle chargers. Now, for a brief overview of how a solar system can work, the solar, in the way that it's going to operate, is it's going to produce the electricity that your home then has the ability to consume directly. And any excess that you might produce can get pushed back to the grid, where you can build up credit. Or if you do have a battery system on site, you can actually charge up that battery for the purpose of using that energy either at nighttime or at peak times if the rates defer. Or better yet, you're able to store that energy for the purpose of backup power in the event of an outage. Obviously, as this has become more and more an issue over the last couple of years, we seem to be more and more susceptible to large storms. Having that backup power has been huge for our customers. And then EV chargers can be integrated into these systems as well. So you can charge your vehicle using clean energy from the solar, and you can also charge your vehicle when the grid is down or at peak times, thanks to those battery storage systems. And so next, we're going to jump right into some of the incentives that are available for homeowners in South Carolina. I want to begin just by saying that we are in no way tax professionals. So what we'll share here is purely guidance based on the information that's available online, as well as our experience working with other customers. I do have experience myself claiming the federal tax credit on the solar system I had installed in my home. So that's something I can speak to. But everyone's tax situation is going to be different. So while we want to share this information and provide you the details in terms of what you can expect, ultimately we're going to encourage you to speak to a tax professional for your specific tax situation. And now, so the federal tax credit, what that looks like is 30% of the total system cost that you can claim directly against your federal tax liability. And that's significant because it's a dollar for dollar credit. It's not a tax deduction. It's much more significant than a tax deduction. If you were to, for instance, have a $10,000 tax credit that you can claim, that's going to go directly against that tax liability, and that is 30% of the system cost. The tax credit is non-refundable. However, all that means is that if you don't have enough liability to claim it all in 1 year, then the additional credit can be rolled over to future years where you might have additional liability. And so long as the tax credit is available to be claimed in that year, you should have the ability to roll it over to that year. And this is filed using IRS Form 5695. You can see here on the right the image of what that form looks like. And then that can be found on the IRS's website as well. So the federal tax credit is that 30%. The South Carolina state tax credit is 25% of the total system cost. Now, this is especially significant because not all states have a state tax credit. Here in North Carolina, where again we do a lot of work as well, there is no state tax credit, and so this is something that is unique to South Carolinians in that they can claim that 25% of the total system cost against their state tax liability. That is again a dollar for dollar credit, so it's more significant than a tax deduction. It is also non-refundable, but the way that this credit is claimed is that you can only claim either $3,500 or 50% of your state tax liability a year, whichever is less. So it's very possible it could take a few years to be able to claim all of the credit that you are eligible for, and that is filed using the South Carolina SCH TC-38 form. So that is the federal and the state incentive for South Carolina homeowners. For those of you who might be on Santee Cooper as your utility provider, you also have available to you a rebate program. So this is sort of the trifecta, right? If you have the ability to claim all three, you've covered quite a lot of the investment between those two tax incentives. And if you're also on a utility here who's going to provide you with a rebate, then it really can make this investment a bit of a no-brainer. And what that looks like is 95 cents per watt based on the AC system size. That essentially amounts to a maximum of $5,700, being that there's a 6 kW or 6 kilowatt AC maximum amount that they will pay out for. That doesn't mean that you can't install a system larger than 6 kW. It just means that if you do, you're going to cap out at that $5,700. Now, that is a cash rebate, meaning if you go solar on Santee Cooper and you take advantage of this program, then you're just going to receive that in the form of a check in the mail. Now, in order to be able to claim this rebate, you have to have your system installed by a Santee Cooper trade ally. Of course, we here at Cape Fear Solar Systems are a trade ally, have been for the last few years now. And so that just means that you're going to be able to take advantage of a rebate like this on a first come, first served basis. So we want to encourage folks, this is a program that might not be around forever. So while it still is, we want homeowners to make sure that they're able to take advantage of it. So to go ahead and summarize real quick what we've looked at in these three incentives, we have the federal tax credit at that 30%, the state tax credit in South Carolina of 25%, and a Santee Cooper rebate that's available to its customers at 96 cents a watt. What this means is that if you live in South Carolina, you can essentially get up to 55% of your system covered by these tax incentives. If you also happen to be on Santee Cooper, you're in many cases looking at 60 to 65% of the overall solar investment that's going to be covered by these incentives. Now, that's quite a lot of money. And so what I want to do next is pass it over to my colleague, Caleb, so he can speak to some of the specific situations he's had homeowners in where they've been interested in exploring solar, why they've ultimately decided to choose going solar for their home, maybe outside of just these incentives. Let me pass it on over to you, Caleb.
Sounds great. Thank you, Gabe. Yeah, here I'll talk a little bit about a couple of different customers who were motivated by different options as well, and why they chose to go solar. This first case study, really what had motivated these folks to reach out to us, set up a time for me to come by and go over some of their goals, were they've owned the home for about 20 years, and over that time they've constantly seen that utility bill rising. And while that monthly cost isn't killing them, they were very curious to see, hey, what can we do about this? So they gave us a call, and really their main goal was just to regain control over their utility bill, not only for them as the homeowner, but for their children when they pass the home on to them as well. So I was able to go by, sit down, listen a little bit to the goals that they were hoping to accomplish. And where we ended up by the end of the meeting, we learned together that through this system, they'd be able to reduce some of the impact they've seen throughout the years of inflation. And in addition, they were able to generate excess energy whenever they're not in the home. So their frequent vacation, or they go on vacation frequently, and that was important to them, that their utility company would actually credit them for any excess energy that they did not use in their home. And throughout this process, they were very pleased to learn about the state and federal incentives. That was not something that they were aware of, and really weren't even sure if they'd be able to take advantage of it at that time, as they are retired. But they were able to sit down with their tax advisor. He walked them through the process, and over the next 5 years, what it's going to look like for them to claim that credit. And ultimately decided, hey, this is a great fit for us. So we were able to help meet some of those goals, and we're looking forward to serving these folks for the long run here. And we can go to the next case study here. This second home, it was a bit of a different motivation behind moving forward with the solar project. So this one here, and their main motivation, they had seen power outages over the last few years that they'd been in the home, and that really made them uncomfortable with the stability of the grid, but also just how much they can actually rely on the utility company in an extended outage. So they were actually comparing a gas generator prior to sitting down and looking into solar. But they said, hey, we heard you can install a battery system and pair it with solar where you don't have to worry about the gas. So these homeowners were certainly anxious to become independent and had some lofty goals in mind. So it was very fun sitting down and making sure we designed a system that not only met their goals, but was really more feasible for what they were hoping to accomplish. And the few main points that really worked out for them to move forward with the project, we were able to design a system, as you can see, those 4 white Tesla batteries there, that enabled their home to be backed up in a power outage. And one of the parts that was very unique to this project was he had actually owned a Tesla Cybertruck. So not everyone has those, but to retrofit his system for the future, you're actually able to back up your home with the Cybertruck and with the future Tesla cars that are coming out. And he's able to do that all within one app, which is the Tesla app. That was a great motivator for him, where at this point he can back up his home on one charge for 3+ days. And with sunlight out, which we typically have after a large storm, he's able to recharge those batteries daily every time the sun comes out. So in a sunny scenario, I mean, he's going to be able to run his home as long as he needs to, should the grid not come back on. So yeah, those were a couple of folks I had the pleasure of working with and really enjoyed going through that process. I will pass it back over to you, Gabe.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing, Caleb. It really is neat to just learn about each individual's experiences. We know that people go solar for a number of different reasons. We certainly know what a lot of those reasons often are, but it's cool to hear how those different challenges are really fulfilled in the solutions that we're providing. And so in order to kind of highlight just what that process looks like and how we're able to diagnose what specific challenges a homeowner is facing and whether or not solar is really a good fit for them, we go through a pretty intentional process. And what that looks like and what the steps of that process are is if you contact our team, and what we're going to do is schedule a free consultation where Caleb is going to work with you to co-create and design a system that's best suited for your goals and needs. And what he's going to look at are your energy needs, your roof structure and shading. And he's actually going to be able to create a 3D model to take into account all of those factors and what a system is going to be able to produce. And it's using that he's going to then collaborate with you on a design for your home. Now, ultimately, then it's going to be up to you to decide if solar is the right fit and if it is accomplishing those goals. And if you do decide that it's the right step to take to make the switch, then what we're going to do is handle everything else for you. You know, everything from permitting, HOAs, applications to the inspections, of course, the installation and making sure it gets activated with the utility. And all you have to do is start saving from there. So yeah, that's what the process looks like. We encourage you to go ahead and reach out to our team if that's something that you're interested in taking the next steps on. Otherwise, we'll jump over here to our Q&A, and I think we might have a question or two. All right. Here, Caleb, I might pass this over to you.
Sure.
It says, with the regular solar panels, is that integrated with the Tesla app we have for the car? So can you monitor your solar in the same app that you monitor your car charging without a Tesla Powerwall, for instance?
Sure. That's a great question, Ross. And yeah, the integrated Tesla monitoring on the Tesla app will only be available with either the Tesla Powerwall or the Tesla solar inverter. Should you use a different manufacturer for your inverter, such as Enphase or maybe Solar Edge, those would not be systems that you can monitor within the app unless you decided to pair them with a Tesla Powerwall 3. Should you add a Tesla Powerwall to any third-party inverter, at that time, you are able to track the production through the Tesla monitoring.
Yeah, that was a great question. Thanks for that question. All right. Now, Caleb, can you speak to a little bit more? Are there other battery options available? I know we saw some of the Tesla Powerwall products. We've talked a little bit about, Cybertruck, things like that. I know not everyone's out there is a fan of the Tesla product. Are there other batteries that people can install?
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of manufacturers of batteries. What I've seen in my experience, it's really what's important to the homeowner. I have plenty of folks who might not want to install a Tesla Powerwall, and we are more than interested in hearing your thoughts and helping collaborate with the homeowner on exactly what it is they're looking for. So there's an LG battery, which is a great option. Enphase as well, which is one of my personal favorites. But I will say the Tesla Powerwall tends to be the most cost effective, and it's a very reliable option that we are huge fans of.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing, Caleb. I think we might have another question or two here.
Yeah, that's a great question, Jay. I see you asked, you have an existing system with 2 Sonnen Core 10 batteries. If you add on to the array, are you able to take advantage of the federal and state tax credits? And the answer to that would be yes. If you decided to purchase more solar panels or purchase another battery to add on to that system, they would both be eligible for both the federal 30% tax credit as well as the 25% from the state. Yeah,
that's a good question. Hopefully that provides some peace of mind to anyone who's looking to add it to their systems. You certainly can claim those incentives for addition to those systems. Another question here, when you have multiple batteries, do they charge evenly or does it charge one at a time?
Sure. Yeah, and that might be more case by case depending how your system is set up. I do see, Charles, you'd asked that question. If you have one Tesla Powerwall 3 with what's called an expansion unit, they would charge one at a time. However, if you had two separate Tesla Powerwall 3s, which both have their own inverters, and the solar was split down the middle between the two, that would enable them both to be charged up at the same time.
Yeah, well said, Caleb. So, and that just has to do with the rating for how quickly those batteries can charge and how much solar is input into them, essentially, correct?
That is correct.
Awesome. Well, cool. Yeah, that was a great question there as well. One last question I think is worth asking here, Caleb. I know we've been hearing a little bit more about some of the different changes to rate structures and how people are billed for their electricity. Can you speak to like how those changes might impact whether or not solar makes sense for someone?
Yeah. So recently, Ori Electric, one of the main utility providers in Ori County, they have gone to what's called a time of use structure, where from say 3 to 6 p.m. every day, they're going to look at your highest demand that you draw from the grid in any 1 hour time frame. So where a lot of these battery systems are going to come into play is what you can now do is run off the solar from maybe 3 to 4 or 5 p.m. And when that sun is no longer available, you can transfer over to your battery power, which would allow you to bypass that high demand charge from the utility company. And maybe you don't avoid it altogether every single day, but the idea would be you are reducing that drastically. So that certainly impacted a lot of our folks in Ori County, and it's allowed a lot of them to reduce their utility bills during those peak hours.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Caleb. I think it's interesting how utilities are sort of finding a way to make it almost more difficult for homeowners to control how they're getting billed for electricity. So it's just neat to see how these products, these integrated home energy solutions are really able to be effective in restoring the control to the homeowner and how they're getting charged for that electricity. Well, cool, y'all. If we don't have any other questions, then I think that'll be it for today's time. Oh, looks like we got one more coming in.
I can
Yeah, go ahead, Caleb.
Yeah, the question was, when there is an outage, does the system still try to feed into the grid? Which is a great question. And part of what we have to install with these battery systems, it's what's called an emergency shutoff switch. So as soon as the grid goes down, that switch is going to flick, which will not allow power to go back out to the grid. And that's important for many reasons. The main one being if there's any linemen working out on the grid, they're not going to get electrocuted. But it also can bring up some other safety concerns electrically if that emergency shutoff switch was not installed. And all utility companies will require that with a battery installation. So it's not anything you can bypass. It's required, and it's actually necessary for whether it's a solar system or solar and battery together.
Yeah, what's unique about the one that's utilized for the battery system, it's very similar to an automatic transfer switch for a generator, right? Each manufacturer has a different name for it. Tesla's is called the gateway, but it's essentially accomplishing the same thing. And it should just provide you with that peace of mind to know that the system in the conditions where it needs to is going to be able to respond and either switch over to that battery power or shut itself off entirely if there is no battery on site.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like another question coming in here.
Yep. Looks like the next question was, what's the warranty on the solar panels? And if it's not integrated with the Tesla app, do we have other ways to monitor the energy? So the warranty on the solar panels themselves, they do carry a 25-year product and performance warranty, and we will also warranty the workmanship of the product. Now, if it's not integrated with the Tesla app and we're using a different type of inverter, all of those other inverters that we work with will have a monitoring software. The unique thing to the Tesla app is if you own a Tesla and you charge it, you have a battery, you're actually able to monitor all of those facets of your system in the same location.
Cool. Awesome. Looks like we have another question on if the two batteries are stacked, do they charge as one?
Good question, Jay. It is a little bit hard to say exactly how your system would work, as I'm not too sure what that is set up as. Gabe, maybe you want to speak a bit to this?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not 100% familiar with the Sonnen system and how it's configured. Really what it's going to depend on is if the PV input is a singular input, and in some cases, Jay, what you're going to have is one's a leader and one's a follower. And so the charge rate might be determined that there's just a leader and a follower, meaning a leader is going to get charged first, the follower charged second. In other cases, it could be determined that the PV input is great enough that it can charge both at the same time. So that's just going to depend on that specific system. To be candid with you, we'd probably have to do a little bit more diligence. It's been some time since I've looked at the Sonnen battery configuration. So thanks again for the question, but yeah, happy to look back into that for you.
Nice.
And then the next question here, if the system is full, will it overcharge if it can't feed the grid? Caleb, you got that one?
Yes. So if the grid is down, your system will function independently, where if the batteries are discharging, the solar does have the ability to fill those batteries back up. But if the batteries are already full and the solar's producing power and your home's not pulling any demand, in that instance, the system would just shut itself off. There are devices called rapid shutdown devices up on the rooftop, which will dial back that solar production. So if it's not needed, it won't be produced. But if it is, then that solar would still be producing.
Well said. All right. Well, if we don't have any other last second questions, I think that's about it for our time today. Thank you all for taking the time to join this webinar. There might be a survey, I believe, if you're leaving today's webinar. Feel free to provide your feedback if you have any other questions, or if there are any other topics that you think would be helpful for us to cover in the future. We'd be excited to. You can reach Caleb at caleb.timothy@capefearsolarsystems.com. You can reach me at gabe@capefearsolarsystems.com as well. Thank you again for attending today, and we hope you have a great rest of your evening. Thanks.